Good morning, everyone, and welcome to week 11. We're going to be starting the reproductive system, and we're going to start with the male reproductive system first. So we're going to start with some pictures. These are pictures from the diploma. You would have been able to sort of label the male reproductive system, the front view, but also you needed to know how to label the side view. So here I'm going to put both pictures, and as we go along and look at the structures of the male reproductive system, we're going to label these. Okay, so we're going to start at the very beginning with the production of sperm, with the production of your gametes. And so we're going to be starting with the testes. So we'll sort of start over here, and then we'll go into this structure right here. And then we're going to see sort of the journey that the sperm takes until it reaches the outside of the male reproductive system and then enters the female. And then we're going to look at the female reproductive system, and eventually we'll go into human development after that. Okay, so first of all, just generally, what are the functions? So we're going to look at the structures and functions of the male reproductive system. And the function of the male reproductive system is to produce. So it's made up of these series of structures whose job is to produce and store very large amounts of sperm. And sperm is the male gamete. Right? So I should say male gametes. Sperm is already plural, just like deer in English. So produce a large amount of sperm. We're talking about 1,000 sperm per every heartbeat. Okay, so it's quite large amounts of sperm that need to be produced. And then, obviously, we need to transfer the sperm to the female reproductive system. Okay, so those are the functions. Okay, all of the structures that we have in the male reproductive section need to perform these functions. Okay, so we're going to start with number 1, and number 1 is going to be the testes, and singular is testis. So testis is 1, testes is plural, and so that's going to be number 6 over here, and it's going to be number 4 on this side. Okay, and not all these are labeled the same on both sides, so we'll make sure that we do that when we get there. Okay, so when it comes to the testes, these, as we said, we're starting at the beginning. This is where large amounts of sperm are being made. So these are the male gonads. Okay, so the male glands as well. So we'll talk about that in just a second. And these guys are held outside the body in a muscular sac called a scrotum. Now, the scrotum has the ability to move up and down in order for the testes to move closer or further away from the body. And the reason for that is that sperm, so we're going to say, can move closer, further from the body to maintain an internal temperature of 34 degrees Celsius. As you know, the body temperature that we have is 37 degrees Celsius. Well, that's too hot for sperm. If sperm stay at that temperature for too long, then they die. And if your testes are not descended, you need to have surgery to make sure that your testes descend right before puberty, way before puberty. And the reason for that is because if you don't, you could be sterile. You can't have babies, okay? And the reason for that is sperm needs 34 degrees Celsius in order to be viable. And so then they're held outside of the body, and then the scrotum can move down or up depending if the temperature needs to be raised or if it needs to be lowered. So hot tubs, tight underwear, those kinds of things are not great for the male reproductive system. I'm talking about repeated exposure, obviously, because of the sperm production, okay? So these guys, we said they produce sperm, but also because they are the male glands, they also produce the male hormone called testosterone. Okay, and we'll talk about what testosterone does in just a bit. Okay. Inside of the testes, we're going to see two specific types of structures. Okay, so this is a cross section of the testes inside, so a micrograph. And what you're going to see is you're going to see two sections. You're going to have sort of these tubes that run inside the testes that you can see right here. And these are called the seminiferous tubules. Okay, so I'm going to use black here and I'm going to sort of go like that. And so that is seminiferous tubules. Okay, and the seminiferous tubules, I don't have a picture for that, but I'm going to try and find one just right in just 1 second. So the seminiferous tubules, these guys, this is where sperm is made. This is where we call that spermatogenesis. Genesis, creation of sperm. Okay, and I'm just gonna see if I can find, let's see if we can get the cross section of the testes. Yes, let's look at some pictures. Perfect. Probably that one's good. Just gonna use that one. Okay, and so you can see inside of the testes, if I do a cross section, all of these guys right here, these are all seminiferous tubules. 250 meters of these tubules inside each one of the testes, coiled in like that. And then what you see here, what this cross section you see here is this under the microscope. Okay, so lots of these little cross sections you can see. And so here, this is where spermatogenesis occurs. Spermatogenesis is just male meiosis. So you start off with these cells that are immature at the very edges of the seminiferous tubules, and then meiosis proceeds in this direction. So as we get closer to the middle of the seminiferous tubules, we get the cell that divides and then divides again into meiosis. And then here in the middle is where you would find the little sperm that sort of swims around in there until it's ready to be called to action. Okay, so those are the seminiferous tubules, and I want to talk about spermatogenesis or male meiosis, sort of as a side So it is two divisions. We know that about meiosis, right? And so we start off with those cells that are immature at the very edges right here, and those guys are called spermatogonia. So let's say we start with one, it's a spermatogonium, and then the spermatogonium, it is not until puberty that it starts to divide. So they begin to divide and divide and divide and make more. And so what we get out of that is something called a primary spermatocyte. And then the primary spermatocyte starts undergoing meiosis. So it goes meiosis 1. And we're going to get there a secondary spermatocyte. And then that secondary spermatocyte is undergoing meiosis 2. And then what we get is we get a spermatid. Okay. And a spermatid as you see here, it's sort of, we have this kind of division that happens over time. You can even look at that. Might not be as clear as we want it to be. Let's see. It's sort of an awkward looking kind of sperm. It's got kind of a big head and a short tail, and it's not until you get sort of to that end. Oh, this, I like this picture because you can see how they're progressing as we're going from the edge of that seminiferous tubule to the middle, and how they become more streamlined, right? So the sperm becomes, it goes from being sort of clunky and kind of awkward looking to being a streamlined swimmer. Okay, and so a spermatid is not quite ready to fertilize an egg. It has to go through a maturation process. And once it goes through that maturation process and becomes more streamlined, that's when we have sperm. Okay, so that's sort of a mature. And so then now it seems like a good time to look at, again, an aside, and look at sperm by itself. So oops. Let's go. And so for here, let's look at a sperm that is nice, like I said, mature. So what we see is we have 3 different sections to the sperm. We have a head, we have a middle, and we have a tail. And the head itself, 2 important parts of the head. First of all, we have a nucleus. And that is the most important part because it has the chromosomes, right? We have 23, humans have 23 chromosomes in there, ready to mix with the female 23 chromosomes to make a zygote. And another thing that is important about the head, as you can see there, is you have something called an acrosome. And an acrosome is like a bag of enzymes that sits right at the top. And these enzymes have a very important function. That function is to penetrate the egg. We have several layers that are going to be covering the egg and protect it. And therefore, we're going to need these enzymes to be able to penetrate that egg. Okay, so, so this is a sac that contains the enzymes needed to penetrate the egg. And when the sperm touches the egg, that particular sac ruptures and releases the enzymes. And sometimes it is the contribution from several sperms in the same area that allows the egg to be penetrated, and then only one sperm will make it through. Okay, so that's the head. The middle portion, as you can see from this picture, it has lots of mitochondria. And if you remember, mitochondria are used for power, for energy. And so we need that to power the tail. Okay, sometimes known as the flagella of the sperm. So the tail, it moves via whipping or lashing motion, let's say, back and forth to propel the sperm forward. at a neck-breaking speed of 3 millimeters per hour. That's how fast sperm travels. And again, it's not just necessary that the sperm can swim. It has to have a particular pattern of swimming. It has to swim straight. If it starts to swim in circles or sideways, then it can have a difficult time making it through the female reproductive system. We have to have sort of a sperm that can travel in a straight line. Okay, so that's the structure of sperm. So back then to our testes, we were looking at seminiferous tubules was, let's give these, let's say A, because we talked about one, right? Yes, so A. So that is one. And B, these are the interstitial cells. And so when we go back to this cross section here, we have our seminiferous tubules are these guys, right? And then the interstitial cells are in between. So the interstitial cells enter in between. They're in between those seminiferous tubules, okay? So what I'll do is I'll pull up the picture again and I'll shrink it down. And this time we'll go, these guys right here are the interstitial cells right there in between. So these are the cells found between the seminiferous tubules, and they produce testosterone. Okay, so they are the ones that produce testosterone. What is testosterone used for? So testosterone is needed to enhance sperm production. It is needed for your sex drive and for the development of secondary sex characteristics. So the secondary sex characteristics are different from your primary. Your primary sex characteristics are your genitals, right? Baby comes out, we look at baby, and we can tell just by looking at the outside plumbing if it is a boy or a girl, right? In terms of gender. Now, secondary sex characteristics, these guys develop at puberty. So for females, it would be breasts, it would be sort of the fatty deposits that come around the hips. For males, these guys are the deeper voice that comes from the enlargement of the voice box, the broad shoulders, facial hair, body hair, pubic hair, all of that stuff that comes from having testosterone. And muscle development. Muscle development in both males and females is due to testosterone. Females produce a very small amount of testosterone. Obviously, we don't have testes, so it's not made in the testes for us. It is produced by our adrenal glands. But we need it in order to build muscle. And so if you have female bodybuilders, we can only produce so much muscle because we only produce so much testosterone. If you want to advance and become one of those, Mrs. Olympia or Miss Olympia bodybuilders, then you have to take outside sources of testosterone. You have to take synthetic testosterone. And there's a whole bunch of changes that can happen with that. The widening of the jaw and the neck, the disappearance of the body fat, therefore breasts disappear. Body hair starts to develop, so you have to, wax and do all that. Sometimes the widening of the jaw makes the teeth spread out. So those are all things that can happen. You can lose your period. Those are all things that can happen if you decide to take extra testosterone. But if you don't, there's only so much muscle that we can produce. So when girls go to the gym and they think that, oh my gosh, if I start lifting weight, I'm gonna get ripped, like I'm gonna look like a dude, it's not gonna happen because we don't make as much testosterone as males, and therefore we can't get as ripped as guys do naturally, okay? So guys, then the testosterone is what helps with that bone development and muscle development as well, and it's secondary sex characteristics when it comes to that, okay? The second structure we're going to look at, we're going to use purple here, is going to be the epididymis. So that's the epididymis. And here it's not labeled, but it would be here. Okay, so that's the epididymis. And so we're gonna go down here. And we're gonna go to I think I was using blue. So the epididymis, this is a storage facility. And remember how I said right up here in spermatogenesis that the spermatids have to mature and become sperm? Well, this maturation process occurs in the epididymis. So once a sperm is being produced in the interstitial cells, once a sperm is in here, it travels from this section right here, and it goes swim, 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 and then it gets stored right in here where it sort of matures and it becomes more streamlined, like we said earlier, okay? So this is the storage facility for sperm to mature. And here is where sperm becomes more motile. It learns to swim a little bit better and pick up sort of that swimming pattern that it needs to be successful in the female reproductive system. Number 3 is the vas deferens. Okay. And I think instead of, I'm gonna do this instead of always scrolling. I don't want you guys to get a headache just from me scrolling. Okay, so the vas deferens would be number 3. Vas deferens. And here is, again, it's not labeled, so we can label it right up here, vas deferens. And there are 2 of them, as you can see, one on each side, one for each of the testes. And the vas deferens is what's going to take the sperm from the testes, from that epididymis, and onto a journey that is going to take it outside of the male reproductive system and into the female reproductive system. So then sperm stays put until male orgasm. And it's the male orgasm, is those contractions that occur during the male orgasm that are going to propel the sperm up the vas deferens, okay? So the vas deferens, oops, I should probably use a different color here, shouldn't I? Okay, here we go. So the vas deferens, these are the tubes that lead out of the testes / epididymis, right? Into the ejaculatory duct. So this occurs during orgasm. So that's how we get the sperm out of the testes and out, okay? And these guys as well are the ones that are clipped during a vasectomy. Okay, so if you get a vasectomy, what's going to happen is the doctor is going to go in and he's going to clip right there. So you still have your testes, you're still producing hormones, you're not losing any of the functions of testosterone. You're still making sperm, but the sperm cannot travel out of the testes, and therefore without sperm you can't have fertilization. All right, and so that's what happens there. And these procedures have gotten really, really good. No scalpel vasectomies, laser vasectomies, where the doctors just go and make a tiny little incision and then they sort of pull out the vas deferens, clip it, cauterize it. They could burn it, or they could clip it, or they could tie it, and then tuck it back in. And now the vas deferens can no longer transport sperm. Okay, so that's the vasectomy right there. It's obviously sort of it's a permanent form of birth control. Okay, and next, we have to say that I'm going to use black here. Let's say that you don't have a vasectomy, as sperm travels from the testes to the penis, because it needs to go on its way out. It picks up fluids from a series of glands to help it on its journey. Okay, and this is what these glands are and what they do. So we're gonna go look at those. All right, so the very first set of glands that we see is these guys right here. And these guys are called seminal glands. Seminal glands. And we have at number 1 here, we have the seminal glands. Okay. We also have number 2, which is the prostate. And then we have number 3, which is Cowper's gland. Okay, so we have here, we don't have the prostate, so we're gonna label it prostate gland. And Cowper's glands. There's 2 of them. Okay, so we're gonna, those 3 are the ones that we're going to discuss down here. So I'm not gonna give them labels. We're just gonna say we have seminal glands. The prostate gland, the only one. And the last ones are Cowper's glands. Okay, so seminal glands, I want you to think of seminal, S. I want you to think of sugar. Okay, so here the seminal glands are going to produce a sugary fluid. It is actually made of fructose. That acts as a fuel for sperm. Remember that sperm, the middle portion, has all of these mitochondria. Well, mitochondria have to be fed, and the way that they get their energy is by consuming sugars, and that sugar is found in the seminal glands. So this is the sperm packing a lunch for its journey into the female reproductive system. Okay, then the prostate gland, I want you to think of P for prostate. And the prostate produces an alkaline Alkaline means basic. Fluid that protects the sperm. So I want you to think of P, prostate, protect, okay? And it protects the sperm against the acidic secretions of the female vagina. Now, when you think about it, the female vagina is open to the outside world, and so it has to protect itself from any sort of foreign invaders that might want to get in. And so we have a series of glands called Bartholin glands in our vagina that produce this acidic mucus. And what it does is it kills anything that walks in. And so here, the prostate gland gives a shield to the sperm. So far, the sperm has picked up food, it has picked up a shield. And then we have Cowper's gland. And again, I want you to think of C for Cowper's. And Cowper's gland is going to produce a fluid again. Produce a fluid that cleans the male urethra before sperm arrives. This is what you would call the pre-ejaculate. And the reason for that is if you look at our pictures, the travel that the sperm has to make, it's going to go from the testes up the vas deferens and then over the bladder, and then it's going to pick up all these secretions, and then look at this, it's going to come out of the urethra. Now, the penis is going to have it's going to have the ejaculatory duct that comes down, but it's also going to have a connection, which you don't see here, because you would see it right here, because this is the bladder. The bladder also connects into the penis, because the urethra and the ejaculatory duct become one and the same. In fact, this is the section that we call the ejaculatory duct right here, because it picks up secretions here, it picks up secretions here, and it picks up secretions here. When we actually enter the penis, that is now known as the urethra. It's not the ejaculatory duct. So the ejaculatory duct becomes the urethra. And when you think about urine, urine is going to have all sorts of chemicals that could be harmful for sperm as it's coming out. And so what Cowper's gland does is it secretes this fluid that is going to clean the urethra. It's going to eliminate all of those chemicals, all of those things that could be harmful to sperm before the sperm arrives, okay? And then once we are done picking up all of these secretions, which collectively, go back to here, all of these secretions are known collectively as seminal fluids. Okay, when you get a vasectomy, you don't have sperm found in your seminal fluid. So the seminal fluids are still produced during ejaculation. You still get the fluids from the seminal vesicles, from the prostate, and from the Cowper's gland. The only thing that you're not going to find in there is sperm. If you take seminal fluid and you put sperm in it, now you got yourself what is known as semen, which in Latin means seed, okay? So it's not until we actually have the sperm, which is the gamete, which is the seed, that we get semen, okay? So seminal fluid plus sperm is going to be semen. If you don't have sperm because of a vasectomy, you still have the seminal fluids that are going to be ejaculated, okay? And last structure of the male reproductive system is going to be the penis. And so right here, we're gonna label that. And here, this would be 4. I think we're gonna say penis. I know that that's like the urethra, but that's fine. We can just say penis there. And when it comes to penis, I want you to notice that you have sort of an enlarged tip. This is going to be known as the glans, not with the D, just G-L-A-N-S, glans penis, which is the tip of the penis, and it's going to be covered by foreskin. Okay, and that becomes important. We're gonna go back to down here. So the penis, so this is the organ that is required to transfer the sperm or semen from the male reproductive system to the female reproductive system. Okay, so we have a shaft made of erectile tissue. And erectile tissue is a very spongy tissue, so it has cells and then it has these pockets. And the pockets are what fill up with blood during an erection. And so as blood enters the penis, it enters these openings, then it fills up, and therefore the penis becomes erect. Okay, so that's what that erectile, it's sort of a spongy tissue. It's called cavernous tissue that fills with blood during an erection. And then there is a sphincter, there's a valve at the base of the penis that closes and prevents the blood from leaving, and so you maintain that erection. So people that take Viagra, what Viagra does is it paralyzes that sphincter, so it allows the erection to be maintained. Now, if you have an erection that lasts for longer than 4 hours, you should call a doctor, because if that sphincter is paralyzed, the blood remains in the penis, it becomes devoid of nutrients and oxygens, and so does the cell, the tissue that makes up the penis. And so you need that sphincter to be unparalyzed, to be freed up, so that the blood can leave and new blood can go in. Okay, so that's what the erectile tissue does. And then we said the tip of the penis is called the glans penis. Okay, and this is equivalent to what females, we have the glans clitoris, the clitoris. Okay, and so this is sort of the equivalent. And we know that when we have the formation of a fetus, we have ovaries way up high into the pelvic area, and then when testosterone kicks in, if you remember the TDF gene, the testes determining factor gene, then the ovaries drop down and become testes, and the glans clitoris enlarges and becomes the penis. Okay, so it's our clitoris is really a little tiny protrusion that would become the penis if we were males. Okay, so they do these kinds of equivalencies on the diploma. They like to do these kinds of equivalency questions. Okay, so the tip of the penis is called the glans penis, and it is the equivalent structure to the glans clitoris in females. Okay, and just like the glans clitoris, it's full of nerve endings. It's very sensitive, obviously. Okay, and then the skin that covers the glans penis is the foreskin, and this is what gets removed if you have a circumcision. So if your baby has been circumcised, then it's the foreskin that has been removed to release the glans penis. If not, the glans penis finds itself inside of the foreskin, okay? The one thing that I would say is definitely know the parts of the reproductive system, know the path that sperm takes. So when we're looking at these pictures again, we're gonna go through testes, epididymis, vas deferens, and then ejaculatory duct, and then penis or urethra. The sperm does not go inside the seminal gland. It does not go inside the prostate or Cowper's gland. Fluids come out of it. So you definitely would have to know that the journey that the sperm takes through it. I'm also going to put a link up for the Great Sperm Race. It's a great video if you want to have sort of an idea of what sperm goes through, if it has to go through the male reproductive system first and then the female reproductive system to reach the egg. And I'm going to continue with the next video, which is going to be on the hormones. Okay, we'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.